Hello and welcome to this evening's edition of Resistance TV. Tonight we're going to be discussing the End SARS protests in Nigeria against the activities of the security services there, who recently opened fire on hundreds of peaceful protesters. You may have seen some of the coverage of this on the mainstream media, although there hasn't been as much coverage as the issue really deserves. The so-called Special Anti-Robbery Squad was apparently disbanded earlier this month by the president, but the demonstrations have continued because of wider concerns about other abuses by the security services and indeed inequality in the country. A freedom of information request in the UK recently revealed that Britain has been providing training and support for Nigeria's security forces through the College of Policing. Before I introduce the guest and play a brief clip, I just want to read out a statement from the Alliance on COVID and Beyond in Nigeria, which is asking for international support from organizations to endorse this statement. So any trade union members or members of political parties who, or indeed any organization for that matter, who are watching this evening, if you could listen to this statement and if you agree, get your branch, your organization to endorse it and then send that to the organization, because they're keen to build up international support for this statement. I'll just read it now. It says, "We, the underlisted organizations and representatives of the organized working people, give our unequivocal support to the End SARS protesters and the mass protest movement and call on our members to join the continuing protests. We call for a continuous intervention of working people and their organizations, and in a manner that can open the way to a structured, open and robust conversation within the movement and among the oppressed and resisting peoples on the way forward. We're horrified by the Lekki Tollgate massacre and other killings by the security forces, as well as by organised criminal groups taking advantage of the situation and state-sponsored thugs. We call for the popular peaceful protest to continue until the articulated demands of the broad movement have been addressed, state-sponsored violence stops, and the government takes action against those who are responsible. The government and the ruling elite is now very weak and divided. It does not know what to do. So now is the time to push forward our trade union demands. The health workers need to restart their strikes. The teachers should organise for action around the promises made to them by Buhari, the president. The NCL and TUC should be planning action over the fuel and electricity price increases and over full implementation of the minimum wage in all states, as well as over the brutal clampdown on the popular protests by government. So if you do agree with that statement, they've asked if you could show your solidarity by sharing the statement widely, which we're doing tonight, obviously, and then sending your endorsements to and solidarity to ascab2020@gmail.com. So please consider that statement. And as I say, if you're a member of a trade union or a political party or an organization, it would be very much appreciated if you could send your solidarity to our comrades in Nigeria. Before I introduce the guest, I just wanted to show a very brief clip, which kind of gives a flavor of the sort of difficulties that Nigerians have been experiencing.
Hashtag End SARS has been trending not only in Nigeria but also across the globe over the past couple of weeks. It means the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. It was set up in the 1990s in Nigeria. It's a squad aimed at the time was aimed at trying to curb things like robbery. But now many Nigerians saying that it engages in police brutality, targeting of young Nigerians. Now, there's been 12 consecutive days of protest, but this hashtag started to burst onto the scene over the past 24 hours, the reason being what happened just a few hours ago. Now, according to Amnesty International, they say that they've received credible but disturbing evidence of excessive use of force made against protesters that has resulted in deaths.
Shoot! Let him shoot! Let him shoot! No problem! No problem! Everyone sit down! Sit down! Sit down!
Nigeria is one of the most unequal countries in the world, and we'll explore that in the discussion going forward this evening. But let me just introduce our guests. Unfortunately, Kawthar Salahudeen is well this evening, has not been able to join us. But I'm pleased to say that we've got Walia Aladipo, who has stepped into the breach to take her place this evening. Walia is also a student in the same way that Kawthar is, and has been an activist on the ground in Nigeria, and has been part of the protests against the brutal security services, and indeed the other problems that Nigerians have been experiencing for far too long. Our other guests this evening are Maurice Ogu, who is a journalist and a co-founder of Vision Media, and is based in Lagos, and is joining us from Lagos this evening. And our final guest, who I'll go to in a moment, is Drew Povey, who is an activist and has worked in Nigeria on and off for the past 20 years or so. So if I could maybe start with you, Drew, could you perhaps give your thoughts on what's happening in Nigeria right now, and perhaps a flavour of what you witnessed when you have been over there?
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Chris. I mean, clearly, I think the most important thing to start with is Nigeria is an incredibly important country. I mean, it is one of the, I think, 55 countries in Africa, but actually 1 in 5 Africans are from Nigeria. So it's a very big country with a population of over 200 million, so well over 3 times the population of Britain. But as you said, it's an incredibly unequal country. There's a lot of oil wealth. It's one of the major exporters of oil, and that's why it's important to the British establishment, one of the major exporters of oil from Africa. But essentially, all of that oil wealth has been stolen by the rich and powerful and made a whole layer of them incredibly rich. So the richest person in Nigeria, Dangote, is actually richer than anybody in Britain. So we've got the richest person, richer than anybody, the Queen, anybody you like in Britain. But you've got a mass of people, and earlier this year in May, the National Bureau of Statistics issued their most recent survey on poverty, and they were saying that 40% of the population are below the poverty line and can essentially only just afford to buy enough food to survive. And I think that is that inequality that is behind these protests, because the only way the government survives is by heavy repression. So we've got a vicious police force that are the direct subject of the protests. They routinely torture people. So their idea of crime fighting is to go out, pick up usually young people, and that's why we've had the youth explosion, pick them up and torture them until they admit to crimes, and then they end up in prison for years at a time. I think something like 60% of prisoners in Nigerian prison are on remand, so they are supposedly innocent until proved guilty, but they suffer atrocious conditions. We've also got massive unemployment and underemployment, especially by the youth. So perhaps half of young people don't have a proper job. In addition, the university lecturers have been on strike for the last 6 months. So all the university students are at home wandering around the streets. So this is really the spark, or the background to the demonstrations. Then obviously we had COVID-19, although in reality there've been a very low level of deaths in Nigeria and as across much of Africa. But there were lockdowns, and that had a massive impact on the informal economy in Nigeria. And so a lot of people tipped over from poverty to just not be able to survive. As I said, we've had a history of repression in Nigeria. There are a whole series of military governments from 1966 until the last one ended in 1999. But we have had massive opposition. So since 1999, there have been at least a dozen general strikes, which have been incredibly impressive. For me, traveling backwards and forwards to Nigeria, it certainly appeared until recently that they were having general strikes almost every year. And I was saying, you have to realize what this means to somebody from Britain when we've only ever had one general strike as far back as 1926, and that very clearly failed. The working class was defeated. When in Nigeria, we have this vibrant working class tradition where general strikes have been used regularly to push the government. And one of the fights has been over the normal neoliberal reforms of removing fuel subsidies. And for me, that was one of the few benefits that the poor urban workers gained from the oil wealth of Nigeria. So transport to work was relatively cheap in Nigeria until the last year or so, when those subsidies were finally removed.
I mean, it's incredibly inspiring, Drew, I think, to see what, the activities of the labor movement in Nigeria. And, it sends a very clear message, I think, to people in the UK and other places around the world that, when the working class stand together, then, it's possible to make progress. And as you mentioned, Nigerians have suffered terribly from inequality and repression. And I remember back 25 years ago, the appalling execution of the incredible civil rights leader Ken Saro-Wiwa on a trumped-up charge. And of course, the implication of British oil companies. I mean, the Shell oil company was implicated and indeed paid paid compensation to Ken Saro-Wiwa's family and the other 9 activists, I think it was, who were executed at the same time. And yet, in spite of this repression, in spite of the way in which the administration there has cracked down, the working class have not been cowed, and they have continued to stand together. And that's incredibly inspirational. And one of the reasons why, in terms of our movement that we're trying to build, we want that internationalist perspective so that we can learn lessons from struggles, liberation struggles from all over the world.
Yes, exactly. I mean, as I said, I think the history of general strikes in Nigeria is an inspiration, and the mass protests that we've had earlier this month in Nigeria is another way, especially I think in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, clearly that had an echo in Britain, and also I think that was one of the contributory factors to the mass uprising that we've had, and the massive daily demonstrations that we had for at least 12 days in Nigeria until recently. I think also there's our responsibility as Britons in terms of what the British government is doing. I mean, presumably, basically to make sure that the oil supplies, that the oil that Shell, for example, is extracting from the Niger Delta, is to make sure that that continues safely from the point of view of the British government. And that presumably is why the British government has very significantly increased their aid to Nigeria. When you would question, well, why are you giving aid to an oil-rich company? And why indeed do you turn a blind eye to the atrocities by the security forces? So, for example, just over a couple of years ago, I think it was the army gunned down and killed 49 people one Monday afternoon on the streets of Abuja, the capital. And that's bad enough. I mean, killing 49 people in one place in one afternoon. But what really shocked me, I mean, I shouldn't be shocked, but it did shock me that 1 week later, Charles and Camilla went ahead with their state visit to Nigeria. So, the
Yeah.
message seemed to be, gunning people down on the streets of Abuja doesn't matter. Doesn't, in the big picture, it doesn't make any difference. And we're certainly not going to stop that official visit in protest against those killings. And I think, at the time they gained less publicity because it was actually Islamist demonstrators who were killed. But clearly, those guns are now being turned on the young people in Nigeria, and that has gained more traction in terms of opposition. So I think more governments have now come out in opposition and criticizing the Nigerian government for the recent killing a week ago, last Tuesday, of a dozen people were shot dead in Lagos, the largest city in Nigeria.
Yeah. Let me bring in, and thank you for that introduction, Drew. It's good to get your insight as somebody who's actually been and worked in Nigeria. But let's hear now from a couple of the activists who are actually living in Nigeria and are part of the protest. So, firstly, let me go to Walia, if I may, Walia, and perhaps you could just tell us what the situation is on the ground right now over there.
Oh, thank you. The situation is pretty shaky. Like we don't. There's a lot of tension in the air, but it's better than it was about 3 days ago, 3-4 days, where there was shooting around. Like they were shooting on the streets, burning down things, and a lot of roads were blocked by hoodlums. But right now, schools have opened today here in Ibadan. So things are slowly going back to normal. But I doubt the way things are going back to normal is going to be permanent again, because a lot of stores have been looted and people who are going about their daily lives have had their means of living actually attacked by these hoodlums. And we would say that the hoodlums are directly connected to the government, because at the start of the protest, we saw how the government sponsored these hoodlums and actually brought them into the protest. So a lot of people would get angrier because now their means of livelihood has been affected. It wasn't as if it was good before due to the pandemic, but with this situation now, really critical for most people. So there's a lot of tension.
Yeah, no, indeed, I can imagine. What's been the reaction to Buhari saying that he's disbanded the SARS group? I understand he's renamed it as SWAT. I mean, are people skeptical about that? I mean, what's people's feeling?
We are very afraid that it's just another hoax, because it's not the first time. 2017, when the protest initially started online, they disbanded it and said they mentioned this, they disbanded and then 2018 they mentioned reforming SARS. So every time they keep another engagement, but there is nothing being done. The activities keep continuing. So there is really nothing to believe because they started.
Sorry, too much interference on your line. We're getting a lot of static. We can't quite hear what you were saying there. I wonder, perhaps if maybe it seems to have gone now, the static. Could you perhaps just start that again? Sorry, it's come back again. Let me come back to you in a moment, if I may, Walia, and hopefully that static will have been sorted out. Perhaps if I could go to Maurice and hear from you, Maurice, in terms of what your thoughts are about the situation and what you've witnessed in terms of the security services brutality, and obviously this has been going on for some time now. And what's your thoughts about Buhari allegedly making some concessions? Are you hopeful that the concessions will go far enough?
Well, yes, as you rightly said, over the years we've been having this type of issue, police brutality, and then we have a president that does not really care about the people. Buhari does not care about the people. So the situation on ground could have been better managed before it went the way it went, if Buhari had been somebody that really cares about the people. He doesn't care. And that's we could see this in his attitude, in his approach to the whole thing. He never spoke a word until he was pushed. And finally, when he even addressed the people, he never even mentioned the Lekki killing, Lekki shooting. So you could see that Buhari is not a president that cares about people. I was mentioning somewhere today, the only ambition of Buhari was to become the president of Nigeria, and he had achieved that. So any other thing could, another person, another thing could go to hell. It doesn't bother, it doesn't concern him. I mean, what actually happened, many of us were even surprised that he did not come out to say he was not even aware of the protest that had gone on for 12 days. So when you talk about Buhari, it's not a man we could really rely on. It's not a man that can really move this country forward at all.
Mm. I mean, I understand, Maurice, that the IMF have apparently pumped in £3.5 billion. What difference, if any, has that made to people on the ground? I understand this was to help Nigeria deal with the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, has there been any material difference? Of the people seen the benefits of that £3.5 billion in your experience?
I mean, if we have our ways, we could have asked them.
Hold on, Maurice, we've lost your sound a little bit. Could you perhaps get a bit closer to the microphone? We seem to, you've gone a bit faint.
Okay, I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear you better now. Thank you. Yeah, carry on.
Okay. If we have our ways, we could have asked IMF to come down to the people and distribute the money themselves. I mean, grants in whatever form that is being given to Nigeria through the Nigerian government to the people had never and will never get to the right people. That's not the truth. We will not get to the right people. So if we have opportunity, we'll ask IMF, come down, and you can see this in the recent events that has been happening in the country. COVID-19 palliatives that were meant to be given to people during the lockdown somehow got themselves in warehouses across the country, and you can see that people have seen that and have started. I don't want to call it. Some of us have been careful to use the word looting the warehouses, but what we have seen is that people have gone to these places to take things or to loot things in quotes. So and during the lockdown, billions of dollars were earmarked to transfer, to give to the vulnerable people in the society. We never got this. I've been moving around. I've never seen somebody who told me he got this money. So the way we have seen COVID-19 palliatives in different warehouses, we will not be surprised that one day we will see money from IMF, money from other organizations, money from Central Bank of Nigeria meant for palliative in people's homes. Already, the anti-corruption agency in Nigeria have told us that they saw huge amount of money meant for COVID-19 in somebody's private account. So when you talk about grant given to Nigeria by IMF, if I have my time, the opportunity, I will ask IMF to come down to Nigeria, to go to the grassroots and distribute the money by themselves. Not to leave our money in the hand of government. It will not get to us. The
Right.
people that need that money will not get the money. The money will be kept somewhere else. 2020 2023 is around the corner, where we have our presidential election. That money will be used to run the election.
What about the deals that Buhari is making with, or the Buhari administration is making with China and Russia? I understand that they're trying to kind of build those links there. I mean, is that again not having any material effect on addressing inequality in the country and benefiting working class people?
Again, Buhari doesn't care. What he needs now is money to run his private business, namely to run the party, to run the forthcoming election. Getting money from China and romancing China and getting money from China, we don't have the impact. We don't see the impact in Nigeria. The money that had been borrowed over the years since Buhari came in, where is it? And he has continued to borrow more. Where is the money? Where is the money? We don't see the money on ground.
Yeah.
So he continues to borrow money for the elite. And the elite will continue to keep the money, embezzle the money. The local people don't have the impact of the money in their lives. Where is the money? So he goes to China, and the mayor say, China, I mean, we always have it very easy to get money from China. Perhaps their terms and conditions is very simple, and so we could easily mix their terms and conditions. So why did they go to IMF? Why did they go to World Bank? Why did they go to Paris? Why did they go to other organizations? You won't go there because their conditions are very tough. But China is lenient, so you can easily go there, collect the money, and use it the way you like. You go back again, they will not ask you, what have you done with the one we gave you last time? You come again, collect again, leaving the bulk for the next generation. I mean, there's been a joke here in Nigeria that young people have been saying, look, China gets it known that the money Buhari is collecting from you, when we get to power, we are not going to pay that money. I mean, it's a joke, but there says that, showing that Buhari collects money the way he likes. He doesn't care what happens to the people.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the voices of the ordinary people on the ground need to be listened to by organizations like the IMF and the administrations in China and Russia and anyone else, for that matter, that's doing deals with the government in Nigeria. They should be demanding or placing conditions, it seems to me, and maybe that's one of the things that people watching this evening could be doing, to ask our representatives to ensure that any deals which are done actually have a material benefit for ordinary people in Nigeria. But I mean, Maurice, just before I go back to Walia, I mean, has there been any material improvement from the days of the kind of military being in charge? I mean, has there been any improvement at all, or are things just carried on as before?
Okay, when we went back to democracy in 1999, I mean, there were a lot of hopes, enthusiasm. I mean, the economy, we were building a vibrant economy. We were trying, knowing that we just came from military. So we were aware we were not going to have everything so easy. So instead building a vibrant economy, doing things that will improve our economy. And we had this, it might not be as we wanted though, but at least a little bit of improvement, a little bit of international recognition, a little bit of respect here and there. And then 5 years ago, when Buhari came to power, he literally destabilized the good thing, the little thing we had been able to build over the years. The first thing that we experienced was recession, and his body language alone sent a lot of investors out of the country. lot of money were taken out of the country. I mean, you can't ask investors to come to Nigeria to invest, and then you make speeches, you give body languages that would give them the impression that, well, I'm not safe. So they had to go. So when you ask in terms of improvement over the years, well, we're not thinking improvement will come, will be sudden. We understood the improvement will be gradual, and we started that in 1999. But only 5 years ago, when he came in, he destabilized the whole thing. And up to now, things have gone to worse every day. So no improvement much in the last 5 years, practically.
Mm. When is the next election, Maurice, in Nigeria?
2023.
Right, so you've got a few more years then to endure this, and hopefully the street protests will make a difference. Let me see if I can bring Walia back in, and hopefully the static on the line has improved a little bit now, so we can hear what you've got to say, Walia. So sorry to have cut you off previously, but we just couldn't hear you because the static was really bad. I mean, youth unemployment is very high, as I understand it, in Nigeria. And one of the really inspiring things, watching it from afar, for me anyway, has been the fact that, you know, young people have been at the forefront of the protests. I mean, I also understand that there have been no classes for students for some considerable time. I mean, how do you kind of read the situation in terms of the young people? I mean, are more young people being politicized by what's been happening? I think we've lost. Well, yeah.
It's been very frustrating for us.
We can't hear you, Walia, unfortunately. The static is so bad.
Can you hear me?
I wonder whether it might be worth maybe trying to dial in again and see whether we can hear you any better. No, I don't think we're gonna. No, I don't think we're gonna. We'll see if we can see if we can do something to behind the scenes to improve the line, because we really want to hear from Walia if possible. I mean, a young activist on the ground. It'd be really important to get her perspective on what's been happening. I wonder perhaps if we could bring Drew back in though, and just get your thoughts about. I mean, I think you've been working on and off in Nigeria. I think we were saying for about 20 years or so. I guess you started working there after the Ken Saro-Wiwa era, but I mean, what from your perspective do you think there's any kind of legacy from Ken Saro-Wiwa's work and you know, the inspiring activities of that civil rights movement that was you know, fighting against the odds in that sort of military dictatorship at the time? Do you think there's any legacy from Ken Saro-Wiwa's period of campaigning, Drew?
Well, I think the main legacy is that the problems he was fighting against remain. So as you said, I mean, that was in 1995. So that was 4 years before the end of the military dictatorship. But I think the way like the police and the army learnt to behave under the military has continued. And you also, I mean, he was very interested in the environmental aspects. I mean, specifically the oil spills in the Niger Delta, and you know, they have continued in broad terms. So that there's still huge spillage of oil, and which is destroying lives. I mean, I did some work a couple of years ago in the Niger Delta. I was working for one of the state governments. And one of the big issues is the flaring of the gas. So the biggest contribution to global warming in sub-Saharan Africa is the flaring of the gas from the oil wells in the Niger Delta. And that was officially made illegal in 1985. But when I was there, from the governor's office in the evening, you could see gas being flared. So that is still very widespread across the Niger Delta. So it's, you know, an example of the government saying one thing and doing another. So as I said, in 1985, it was made illegal, but it's continuing. And actually, the major contribution, the promise that Buhari made at the Paris climate talks was to end gas flaring, but not until, I mean, it was, I can't remember, it was sometime in the future. So despite the fact that, you know, it's been illegal for the last 35 years, Buhari just says, oh, well, we will stop it, but sometime in the future. And it was also, I mean, I think in 1995, when he was first elected, he did win the popular vote. He promised to reduce corruption and put significantly more money into education, health, and social protection. And that really just has not happened. I mean, that was one of the things that he claimed on his broadcast last week. So he broadcast to the nation last Thursday, and he claimed that, you know, why are you protesting? My government, he actually said, my government has done more to reduce poverty in Nigeria than any other government. And that, I mean, I think, you know, it's absolutely clear to any poor Nigerian that that is not true, that things have not improved. And certainly, you know, with the lockdowns on COVID-19, I mean, this year, things got significantly worse, especially for young people trying to find work. Climate change has made a significant difference to Nigeria. You've had a huge increase in insecurity. So you've got the Boko Haram, like it's a civil war going on in the northeast. There were disputes between farmers and cattle herders, which is basically down to climate change. So the cattle herders are moving south to find vegetation, to find food for their cattle, and then interfering with the farmers who are suffering because there's been huge population growth in Nigeria. And then we've had huge general insecurity. So there's been an increase in kidnappings, so people turning to robbery and kidnappings. So there is there's a general feeling, I think, across the country that things are getting worse. Insecurity is getting worse. Poverty is getting worse. Unemployment is getting worse. And I think it's that perception that is so important. As long as people think things are getting better, that things will get better, then there is hope for the future. But I think that hope has been destroyed. And you know, we had the first 15 years after the military era was with the PDP, and then we had a change of government with the hope that something would get better, and it hasn't. It's got worse. And
I suppose the hope rests with the street protests now. I mean, one of the things that Ken Saro-Wiwa was campaigning about a quarter of a century ago, before he was brutally executed by the military regime at the time with the connivance of the Shell oil company, was the fact that, you know, many ordinary Nigerians were not seeing the benefits of the oil riches of the country, and regions where the oil pipelines went through didn't even have electricity. And not only that, oil spillages that you've just touched upon there was having a profound impact on public health. I mean, and for the temerity, frankly, of standing up for ordinary people, Ken Saro-Wiwa and other civil rights leaders at the time who were saying, look, you know, we need to share the nation's riches a bit. It's not too much to ask, surely, is it, that ordinary Nigerians should see some of the fruits of the nation's riches, and not to even have electricity in a very wealthy nation, and to, you know, be seeing birth defects and other public health problems as associated with the pollution caused by these oil companies. I mean, incredibly, just appalling, it seems to me. And I just wonder whether there's been any changes, any improvements in that regard. And one other thing, just in regards to that, I mean, you know, as I say, Ken Saro-Wiwa was campaigning about these issues and you know, demanding those changes. They've not, as well. I'd be interested to sort of hear whether those changes have been brought about, and you know, what's the people's kind of expectations really in that sense? I mean, what are they saying about the fact that you know, electricity isn't being supplied when the oil pipelines are running through the country? And your point about, you know, the Buhari regime, you know, not abiding by the environmental standards that he said he would do. Of course, there's an obligation, isn't there, on the oil companies as well? I mean, okay, they can get away with it, but I mean, they don't have to do these things, do they?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, they're doing it presumably because the cheapest way of dealing with the gas is to flare it. And I mean, the point you were making about electricity, I mean, you've got one of the major oil exporters in Nigeria. You've got the major source of electricity power in Nigeria is gas. So most of the electricity that's generated in Nigeria is powered from gas, and yet the oil companies are flaring it. And then you've got only roughly half the households in Nigeria have electricity at all. So half don't have it.
So that's still a problem then. So what Ken was campaigning about, I mean, that's still not been addressed. I mean, that is a scandal, of course.
Yes, I mean, this is something that government after government promised, and that they claim to have put, you know, millions of or billions of naira or dollars or whatever into it. But there is no significant difference. As I said, roughly half of households don't have electricity, and the ones that do have it, if they're lucky, for 12 hours a day.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I guess that you know, that we can do in this country, ordinary people can do in this country, and you know, trade unions and other organisations who may have shares in some of these oil companies, is go along to the annual general meeting and you know, make a stink about this. You know, ask some difficult questions about their abuse of the environment, their abuse of the Nigerian population, and you know, and demand that they up their game a little bit. And let's just try once more for if we can get Walia, if now, or have we lost you? Is Walia still with us? Hi, Walia, can you hear us? Hello? I think we might have lost Walia, unless... No, I don't... You're not muted, are you? Have you muted yourself, Walia? No, Hi, yeah. No, I thought we got her back there. I was really sorry about that. It's really important to try and get Walia. We'll keep trying if we can. Let me just bring Maurice back, if I may, and just ask one final question before I go to Sean to get a feel for what people are saying who have been watching this evening. I just want to get your thoughts, if I may, Maurice, about the secret police department there, this kind of state security. Tell us a little bit about that. We've heard about the SARS and so on, but I mean, what influence is the kind of, you know, the sort of Department for State Security having on the country and on free speech and freedom of assembly and so on?
Okay, you know, and the police, we have different units, and the police that have been given mandates to do different things. So the Department of Secret Police is one of them. Over the years, their main job has really been to gather intelligence report, and to share this report with other security agencies around. But we have seen that despite having different departments, different units, the police, things still continue to happen. We still have killings, Boko Haram here and there, robbery. So we begin to ask the question, does it mean that Department of State Security are not really doing what they are supposed to do? I mean, there will be report, there will be intelligence that a certain crime, or shooting, or killing, or attack, rather, certain attack would happen, and it will actually happen. What is going on? So when we talk about DSS, Department of State Security, I wouldn't really say that they've been up to their duty. Otherwise, we would not have been having different attacks we usually have across the country, because they are supposed to gather intelligence report and share this report with other sister agencies around, so that such attack could be averted. But we have not seen that. We have not seen that. In fact, before SARS became what it has become, it used to be DSS that people were scared of. People were scared of DSS because when they arrested you, you were not sure of giving of your rights being respected and all that. But when SARS came, when SARS became notorious as we have it today, the SARS activities activities kind of mellowed the activities of DSS. Otherwise, they are of the same. They are birds of the same feather, really.
Right. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you for that. Let me bring in Sean now, so that we can get some reflections and observations, and maybe some questions even from our audience this evening. Over to you, Sean.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for the interesting chat this evening. We've got some good people on YouTube. We've been chatting throughout what you've been saying, and people are shocked, obviously, by what's going on, and we'd like to find out a little bit more information. So I'll just give a shout out to a few of the people who've been chatting live. Shamsa Chauhan, Vicky Nicolaides from Greece, Julie Battison, Jonathan Cooper, and CMink12 thinks Drew Povey is amazing. He loves you. So our first question tonight from Shamsha, what can we do to show solidarity? And Jonathan asks a similar question. He says, the Nigerian community here is taking a leading role. I'd like to know how the wider movement can support them.
Do you want to come in on this, Maurice, first, or shall I go to Drew? Maurice?
One way we could show support in this regard, as you mentioned during the introduction, we could send a mail to ASCAP. I think I was seeing their email address was displayed on the screen the other time. We send email address to ASCAP, and they could give you some specific areas they would want you to show solidarity. But in the larger perspective, it could make the cause we are fighting for in Nigeria, make it go viral, make it known to the people around the world, make it known to the government, different governments around the world. So those are the areas I think it could show solidarity.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think just on your point about the email as well, and I think I may have misspoken, given the incorrect email address, the full email address to send your messages of solidarity to ASCAB is ASCAB, ASCAB 2020 @gmail.com. Drew, what's your thoughts then in response to those observations and question indeed that Sean has just read out?
Well, I'd agree with Maurice in terms of the pressure on our governments. to do something about our relationship or their relationship with Nigeria. I mean, I also think it's building up the socialist alternative, making the trade unions stronger in Britain, because most British people don't know a lot about Nigeria, but Nigerians do know about Britain. So if things are happening, if there are demonstrations, if there are strikes in Britain, then Nigerians will certainly know about it. So in a sense, I think the best solidarity that we can do in Britain is to build a stronger base, build a stronger socialist base, build a stronger trade unions, and bring back the more vibrant trade unions that we used to have in the 1970s. And then that can be feedback as an inspiration in terms of Nigerian trade unionists.
Well, it's important, I think, that that the working class movement, progressive movements, do link up around the world and share solidarity and gain strength from each other. And as well as to emphasize the point that I was making earlier, Drew, as well as the points that you and Maurice have just made there, I would also, I think, make the point that we should be doing whatever we can where our organizations have shares, for example, in these oil companies, is to go along to the AGM, and if you can get into the meeting, go in and ask some difficult searching questions of the board, because their record is absolutely abysmal. It's appalling. It's shameful, frankly. But let me go back to Sean for further thoughts from our audience.
Okay, so Vicky Nicolaides over in Greece, she's made a few comments about environmental issues. She says oil is so obsolete. The pollution here is horrendous. The desperation to keep oil versus sun, wind, tide, thermal transfer with heat pumps, etc. The idiocy of maintaining the status is unconscionable. She goes on to say, yes, it's so important to understand the impact of climate change causing conflict plus foreign interference. The colonial attitude is alive and well, unfortunately. And then she asks, is Nigeria is perfectly situated for solar? Is it possible an infrastructure for electric is needed? And then finally, so after the environmental issue questions, Jonathan Cooper asks, why do you think Nigerian workers have managed to get on the same page easier than UK trade unionists? So just before you ask those questions, Chris, I just want to ask our audience to subscribe to our channel, spread the news. Obviously, this is a very important issue that we're discussing this evening. Use the hashtag #EndSARS and spread this video as far and wide as you possibly can. Even use it to get into your trade union movements and put in some motions.
Any thoughts on that, Maurice, in terms of the environmental question, and would solar potentially be an area that Nigeria could excel in, as well as oil production, or alternative ultimately to oil production?
That is correct. Solar is one area we could look around as alternative to oil. Drew mentioned at the other time that the gas that we could have been using to power electricity in Nigeria is actually being flared up by the oil company. And we begin to ask the question, does it mean that we don't have the capacity to turn this gas into electricity? Or we just turn blind eyes to all these things? I mean, coming to this program this night, obviously I was just worried that could lights go at any moment? I mean, Drew mentioned the other time how erratic power supply is in Nigeria. And I'm just praying that this the light I have now to be on this program will not go again until we finish this program. So looking into solar as alternative to gas and all that, it's a good area to explore. And I will say here that there's market for that.
Yeah.
But again, you have to also explore very well and make sure that the policies are conducive enough. Otherwise, I will stay here that there's a market for that. So if anyone is willing to go into solar to power up Nigeria, such idea is really amazing.
Maybe some of the deals which the work that's being done with China, that is maybe an area that potentially could be quite lucrative on that front, because China has been leading the way in many ways on alternative energy. So let be interested to see how that develops. I think the other point that was made about the motivated trade union activities, and what's been inspiring, again, to come back to the point I was making, was how kind of young people and organised trade unionists are kind of seemingly anyway from afar working together, and in these protests. I mean, and how do you do that? I mean, it's been inspiring, it's great, and it's something that we could definitely learn a lesson or two from here in the UK. Any thoughts, Maurice, on that point?
Drew mentioned at that time that it seems that we in Nigeria, we know a lot more about UK than people in UK know about Nigeria. And so if people in the UK and had been following the protests by the young people in the last few weeks, there could be things they can also learn from the protest. But for us here, we've learned a lot about the protest. But for you in the UK, then one thing it could learn, I think it could learn from that, is that we have people at the other side who don't enjoy the type of life they ought to enjoy. You might have everything in UK, but you learn from this protest that there are some people at the other side that don't have things you enjoy in UK. There are people at the other side that are afraid to tell their government what they need. There are people at the other side whose government has been suppressing over the years. There are people at the other side whose government does not care about them. I think this is what I think people in the UK could learn. And so I would encourage people in the UK to do more, to pay more attention to the people at the other side. And I would agree with you. Once again, I agree with Drew. We in Nigeria here, well, we on this side, we know much more about the UK, maybe perhaps more than the way people in the UK know about us.
We've made a small contribution this evening, Maurice, to spreading a better understanding of what's happening in Nigeria, and hopefully learning a few lessons from the struggle that yourself and the young people and the organised working class trade unions have been engaged in. And all strength to your elbow. You have our absolute solidarity, and we'll do what we can to support you. We're out of time, unfortunately, unless Drew, very, very briefly, if you've got any closing remarks, Drew.
I think there's the question from Shian in terms of fear for the future. I mean, I think things are quite worrying. I mean, they announced today, for example, that 300 young people or people had been arrested in Lagos. So this was in one area of Lagos. So there are elements of a heavy repression that could be happening. So we're hoping that, I mean, that's why we've got the appeal from ASCAB in Nigeria, appealing for support from British trade unionists, because I think that does make a difference. It does make it much more difficult for the government to unleash further repression if people are raising the issues in Britain.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, thank you very much indeed to all our speakers this evening. And hopefully, as I've said, we've made a small contribution to spreading the word about what's happening in Nigeria. both in terms of to learn lessons, but also to express our solidarity. And please take the opportunity, as we've said repeatedly throughout the programme, to ask your trade union branch, local Labour Party branch, or other political party that you're a member of, to express solidarity, or any organisation. And also consider the point I made about getting your organisation to make representations, if you're shareholders, that is, at the oil company AGMs. And let's start putting the pressure on these oil companies as well as on our elected representatives. Let me thank our excellent speakers this evening. Huge apologies that we had real technical difficulties hearing from Walia Aladipido, but what she did say, I think, was useful, and it's just unfortunate we weren't able to hear a bit more from her. Also want to thank Maurice Ogu for your insight, Maurice. It was really inspiring to hear from you, and also to Drew Povey for your thoughts, and particularly given your experience of working in Nigeria. Please tune in next week to Resistance TV. We're starting at a slightly earlier time of 6:30, and we'll be discussing on that broadcast what is the meaning of Zionism. So that promises to be a very interesting discussion. So if you have a spare hour or so available from 6:30 next Wednesday, please tune in. Thank you for watching this evening, and good night.